Hi, I'm Venora. Do you know what it feels like when someone rips away every ounce of dignity you have, just to prove they own you? My stepfather did that in front of an entire boot camp yard. He grabbed my collar, tore my shirt, and sneered, "Women like you are only good at hiding." They all laughed, until they saw the tattoo on my back. That's when the laughter stopped. But here's the thing. Humiliation was only the beginning. What came next? It wasn't just training, it was war. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening and where are you? Drop a comment. I read everyone. The smell of hot asphalt hit me the moment I stepped out of the truck. North Carolina in late August doesn't just greet you, it slams into you. My old boots scraped against the gravel as I adjusted the straps on my backpack, the fraying fabric digging into my shoulders. The truck door creaked when I shut it, a sound almost as tired as I felt. I took a deep breath and told myself this was the first step toward something bigger. Not for them. For me. Boot camp wasn't about a new start. It was about proving I wasn't the quiet, invisible youngest daughter anymore. I'd spent too many years being written off by my mother, by my siblings, by him, my stepfather, Brackett. Just thinking his name made my jaw tighten. The open training yard spread out in front of me. The sun scorched everything, the metal bleachers, the dirt track, the wide-eyed new recruits standing in loose lines. Their conversations paused when they noticed me. I caught the smirks, the side glances. A few of them weren't subtle about sizing me up, like they already decided I'd be the weak link. One girl, tall with a sharp ponytail and sharper tongue, muttered something to the guy next to her. They laughed. I didn't care enough to ask what was so funny. "Figures," I heard her say as I walked by. "She looks like she got lost on her way to yoga class." I ignored her. The worst part wasn't them. It was seeing him. Brackett walked across the yard like he owned it. Same squared shoulders, same swagger that had filled our house with his presence long before I was old enough to fight back. But here, he wore his authority like a second skin. The uniform made him untouchable, and I could feel the weight of his eyes on me before he even opened his mouth. "Well, well," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the yard. "Didn't think you had it in you to show up here, kid." I hated that word, kid. He always used it like a weapon, a reminder that no matter how old I got, I'd always be beneath him. "Sergeant," I said, my tone neutral, professional. That was the point. I came here as a recruit, not his stepdaughter. He smirked like he'd just won a game I didn't know we were playing. "Sergeant," he repeated, mocking me. "You think a title changes who you are? You can dress it up all you want, but some things don't change." The drills started soon after. Push-ups, sprints, things I'd practiced 100 times before coming here. I pushed through the heat and the stairs, telling myself to keep my head down, but Brackett wouldn't let me. Halfway through, I felt his shadow fall over me. "Up," he barked. I stood, dust sticking to my sweat-soaked arms. "You think you can hide in the crowd?" His voice grew louder, drawing every eye in the yard. "I wasn't hiding," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "Oh, you weren't hiding?" He stepped closer until I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Women like you are only good at hiding." The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just an insult. It was him dragging every memory of my childhood into the daylight. The times he'd told me I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Then, before I could react, he grabbed my collar and yanked. The fabric tore with a sickening rip, exposing my back. The yard erupted in laughter. It echoed, cruel and sharp. I stared at the dirt beneath my boots, willing myself not to flinch. Then the laughter stopped. I felt it before I saw it, the shift, the silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Brackett's hand froze mid-air. His smug expression faltered. I straightened, pulling my shoulders back just enough for the tattoo to catch the light. A coiled viper wrapped around a shattered skull. Black ink etched deep, each line a reminder of what I'd endured to earn it. Ghost Viper. The program most of them thought was a myth. Brackett's face went pale. Nobody said a word. I didn't explain. Let them wonder. I adjusted my torn shirt, picked up my gear, and walked away. Each step off that field felt heavier than the last, but not because of shame. They didn't know the full story. Brackett didn't either. And that's how I wanted it. For now. As I reached the barracks, I exhaled slowly. The humiliation still stung, but beneath it was something else. A quiet reminder of who I really was. I didn't come here to prove anything to them. I came here to prove it to myself. But if Brackett thought I'd stay silent like before, he was about to learn what Ghost Viper really meant. The next morning, the air in the barracks felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed last night's whispers. I could hear them before I even opened my eyes. Low voices trading rumors, the occasional laugh that cut too sharp. She's Ghost Viper? No way. Why would someone like her even be here? I didn't need to ask who they were talking about. I sat up slowly, keeping my face neutral while my hands quietly tightened the laces of my boots. Their stares clung to me like damp clothes, curious, probing, waiting for me to either confirm or deny their speculation. I gave them nothing. The less they knew, the better. When I stepped outside, the early morning chill was almost pleasant, but I knew it wouldn't last. The sun would be brutal by mid-morning, and so would Brackett. He stood by the training yard already, arms folded, waiting like a wolf eyeing a cornered rabbit. "Barnes!" His voice cracked across the yard like a whip. I walked toward him without hesitation, every step deliberate. "Sergeant," I said evenly, keeping my eyes forward. "You like standing out, do you? That little show you put on yesterday wasn't enough?" His tone carried for everyone to hear. I didn't answer. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Fine. You want attention? You'll get it. Drop and give me 50. Mud from last night's storm clung to the ground like a trap. I lowered myself and started the push-ups. "Count them out," he barked. 1, 2. My voice stayed steady. "Louder!" I raised my volume, each number landing like a strike against my pride. When I finished, he wasn't done. "Run laps. 10. You're a liability, Barnes. Let's see if you can keep up with the rest of us." A few of the cadets snickered. Tara, the sharp-tongued one from yesterday, cupped her hands around her mouth. "Careful, Barnes! Don't trip on your own ego!" Lance, another one who lived for this kind of chaos, joined in. "Ghost Viper, huh? More like Ghost Turtle." I didn't rise to it. That's what Brackett wanted, for me to snap, to give him more ammunition. Instead, I ran. The mud sucked at my boots with every step, but I kept my breathing controlled, my face unreadable. When the drills finally ended, my muscles burned, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. By breakfast, the whispers had shifted from curiosity to mockery. I carried my tray through the mess hall, scanning for a spot, when Derek, a big, loud cadet who thought being obnoxious made him funny, tossed a piece of bread onto my tray. "Eat up, Ghost Viper," he said, smirking. "I hear snakes like scraps." The table laughed. I stared at my plate, unmoved, and sat down at the far end of the bench. I ate slowly, deliberately. Let them think I was unfazed. Ghost Viper training wasn't about strength. It was about control. Discipline under humiliation. You didn't give your enemy your reaction. My calmness seemed to bother Derek more than any comeback would have. "Cat got your tongue. Or do Ghost Vipers just hiss?" he said, flicking a bit of egg in my direction. I kept eating. Then, quietly, someone slid a fresh roll onto my tray. "Elena, a quiet cadet I hadn't spoken to yet. She didn't meet my eyes, didn't say a word, but that small gesture cut through the noise. It was nothing, and it was everything. A reminder that I wasn't completely alone. When breakfast ended, I carried that moment with me like a shield. Back in the yard, Brackett was already shouting orders, but I heard none of it the same way anymore. He thought humiliation would break me. But Ghost Viper had taught me that humiliation is just another kind of camouflage. I'd let them underestimate me, let them think I was just the youngest, the weakest, the easy target, because when the time came, they wouldn't see me coming. But even camouflage has its limits, and Brackett was about to push me past mine. By the end of that week, my body felt like it had been carved out of stone and mud. But it wasn't the soreness that weighed on me. It was the eyes. The stares that followed me every time I crossed the yard, the whispers that stopped just short of my ears. They were dissecting me, trying to figure out if I was a fraud or something worse. The obstacle course that morning was brutal. Steep rope walls, uneven trenches, balance beams slick with dew. Brackett called us to the starting line, his voice sharp like always. But when he called my name, he added one more detail. "You're with Lance today." A ripple of amusement ran through the group. Lance, big, arrogant, and itching for an excuse to humiliate me, grinned like a kid handed a new toy. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't say a word. We moved as a pair through the first few stations. He kept accidentally bumping me with his shoulder, crowding me on the narrow beams, making the entire exercise 10 times harder than it had to be. When we reached the rope wall, I climbed steadily, gripping each knot, focusing on the rhythm of my breath. "Move faster," he snapped from below. "I'm going as fast as I can," I replied without looking down. That's when I felt it, his hand yanking at my ankle. It wasn't enough to pull me down completely, but it threw me off balance. I slipped, slamming into the wall before tumbling into the mud below. The yard erupted in laughter. "Ghost Viper?" Brackett's voice cut through the noise. "More like Mud Viper." I could feel the heat rising in my face, the mud seeping cold into my uniform. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to tell them all exactly what I thought of their little show, but I didn't. I got up, wiped the mud from my eyes, and finished the course in silence. When it ended, Brackett called out, "Barnes, with me!" I followed him to the equipment shed, a cramped, dimly lit space that smelled like sweat and old leather. He closed the door behind us, leaning against it like he owned the world. "You think that tattoo makes you someone?" His voice dropped low, just for me. "You'll always be the little girl no one wanted." The words hit harder than the fall. My chest tightened, and suddenly I wasn't at Fort Bragg anymore. I was 12 again, standing at the dinner table, holding up a certificate from school. "Look what I got," I'd said, hoping for some sign of pride. Brackett had laughed, just like now. "That's cute. Maybe one day you'll do something that matters." And my mother? She'd stayed silent, eyes on her plate. That memory bled into the present, as if no time had passed at all. "I see it on your face," he said, smirking. "You hate me, but deep down, you know I'm right." I didn't respond. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He left me there, standing in that shed, feeling like I had been peeled open and left out in the sun. I made it back to the barracks somehow, though I don't remember the walk. I locked myself in the bathroom, gripping the sink until my knuckles turned white. My reflection stared back at me, mud-smeared, hollow-eyed, humiliated. "Why am I even here?" I whispered. For the first time since I arrived, the thought of leaving didn't seem so impossible. The door creaked, and Elena appeared in the hallway when I stepped out. She didn't say much, just handed me a clean towel. "Don't let him win," she said softly. It was such a simple thing, but it snapped something back into place. Leaving now would mean proving Brackett right, that I was the little girl who couldn't stand on her own. That night, lying in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. If Brackett wanted to destroy me, I'd make him regret ever trying. But vengeance doesn't come easy, and Brackett still had cards to play. 2 mornings later, I woke before the barracks even stirred, slipping out quietly into the cool air. The training yard was empty, dew still clinging to the grass, and the sky had just begun to lighten. I liked it that way. No eyes on me, no whispered judgments, just the sound of my boots on the dirt and the steady rhythm of my breath. Ghost Viper training had taught me that if you couldn't dominate the battlefield with strength, you dominated it with preparation, and that morning I intended to reclaim my ground. I pushed through my own circuit, push-ups, squats, sprints, until sweat ran into my eyes. Every motion had a purpose. If I can't beat them by sheer force, I told myself, I'll beat them by precision. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about regaining control over my narrative. By mid-morning, the yard was alive again. Brackett had us assemble in the briefing room for a tactical session. He stood at the front, arms folded, his presence daring anyone to challenge him. He outlined his plan for a mock operation, rattling off assignments with the same authority he'd always wielded. I sat quietly, taking notes, my heart thudding, not with nerves, but with intent. Then I saw the flaw. He'd left one flank under-resourced. Anyone who had been in Ghost Viper could see it, and when he paused for questions, I didn't hesitate. "Sergeant Brackett," I said evenly, "that plan leaves the east perimeter vulnerable. If we're simulating a hostile incursion, we'd be outflanked in minutes." The room went still. He turned slowly, his gaze narrowing. "And what would you suggest, Barnes?" I kept my tone steady, casual almost. "Redistribute the second team from the southern approach. They won't need as much coverage if you fortify the eastern flank. It's basic maneuver, adaptable defense." For a beat, the only sound was the soft hum of the overhead lights. Then the colonel, who had been observing silently from the back, gave a small, approving nod. It wasn't much, but in a room like this, it was everything. Brackett's jaw tightened. "Noted," he said, but I could feel his fury simmering beneath the surface. After the session, he didn't call me out, not right away. That wasn't his style. Instead, later that day, he announced a new drill, a solo navigation exercise. "Barnes," he said, looking right at me, "you'll be going first. Let's see if that Ghost Viper insight holds up when you're on your own." It was meant to sound like an opportunity. I knew better. It was punishment disguised as a test, an endurance trek through rough terrain with just a compass, a map, and limited supplies. That evening, as I packed what little gear I was allowed to bring, Elena appeared at my bunk. She didn't say much, just placed an old compass in my hand. "This one's more reliable than the standard issue," she said softly. I met her eyes and gave a brief nod. She didn't need to know how much that small act of kindness steadied me. By the time I set out the next morning, I'd already decided how this was going to go. If Brackett wanted to break me, I'd make him think he was succeeding. I deliberately underperformed at the start, slowing my pace, making a few mistakes that would filter back to him. Let them think I was struggling. In Ghost Viper, we learned one thing above all else. The best strikes come when your enemy is convinced you've already lost. As I trudged through the thick underbrush, every step felt like part of a bigger plan. Brackett thought he was playing me, but I had news for him. He hadn't even seen my first move yet. Brackett thought he was playing me. But in Ghost Viper, we learned the best moves come when your enemy thinks you're losing. But underestimating me would cost him more than he imagined, and it was time to make him feel it. A week passed, and something inside me shifted. The shame that used to cling to me after his attacks didn't feel the same anymore. Brackett's words, his little power games, They no longer cut as deep. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror one night, wiping sweat off my face after evening drills, and realizing you can't destroy what doesn't need your validation. That thought alone steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't playing defense. I was preparing for offense. The chance came sooner than I expected. It was early evening when Brackett cornered me in the hallway. A few cadets lingered nearby, leaning against the walls, chatting after training. He knew they were there. He wanted an audience. "Barnes," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "I've seen kids with more grit than you. You think one tattoo makes you special?" "Ghost Viper doesn't make you a soldier, it just makes you branded." The hallway went quiet. All eyes turned to me. I didn't shrink this time. I met his stare, calm, deliberate. "Funny," I said, my voice even. "For a man so sure of himself, you spend a lot of time trying to convince me I'm weak." It landed like a punch. A ripple of suppressed laughter and exchanged glances passed through the group. Brackett's jaw tensed, his face flushed, but he didn't reply. He couldn't, not without losing more ground. I walked past him without breaking eye contact. That silence, that was mine. The next day, I made another choice, one that seemed small, but felt monumental. Instead of sliding into my usual corner of the mess hall, I took a tray and walked straight to the center table. I could feel the stares, the murmurs, the subtle pause in conversation. It was like watching a room tilt. Lance, of course, couldn't resist. He smirked as I sat down. "Hey, Ghost Viper girl," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell us, did you have to cry to get that tattoo, or did they just feel sorry for you?" A week ago, I might have lowered my eyes, ignored him, let the sting burn in silence. But now, I gave him a faint smile. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes earning one," I said softly. The table went silent. It was his turn to flush. The laughter didn't come, not for him. A couple of cadets shifted uncomfortably, some even smirked at him. For the first time, I wasn't the one on the receiving end. From that point on, I started waging a quieter kind of war. It wasn't about yelling or public confrontations. It was about taking up space where he didn't want me, about performing drills better than his favorites, about making failure impossible to ignore. In the training yard, I deliberately outpaced the cadets Brackett usually praised. I nailed the marksmanship drills, kept my composure under timed stress tests, and made sure others saw it. Not because I needed their approval, but because it undercut his narrative. Every time Brackett tried to paint me as a liability, I answered by proving, silently and undeniably, that I wasn't. And the more I did, the more I saw the subtle shifts. Cadets glancing at me with something other than disdain, Elena offering me quiet nods of encouragement, even a few of Brackett's inner circle hesitating before joining his mockery. Brackett noticed, too. I caught him more than once slipping into closed-door meetings with other instructors, his face drawn tight with frustration. He thought this was still his game, that he was teaching me my place. But I knew better. When you've been trained to haunt shadows, you learn the power of psychological warfare. "He thinks I'm just surviving," I whispered to myself one night, lying awake in the barracks, listening to the steady hum of the AC and the quiet breathing of exhausted cadets. But this is me counterattacking. I'd taken my first real shot, and now I had to brace for the counterpunch. And Brackett didn't disappoint. His next move hit harder than I'd imagined. It started on the training grounds during a live fire drill, the kind where everyone's nerves are frayed because one wrong move can get someone hurt. The sun was glaring, dust hung heavy in the air, and the smell of gunpowder clung to everything. We were halfway through when Brackett's voice cut through the chaos. "Barnes!" he barked, his tone sharp enough to make every head turn. I lowered my weapon and jogged over, heart pounding, not from the drill, but from the way he was looking at me. He held up a folded map, shaking it for everyone to see. "Care to explain this?" I frowned, unsure what he meant. This, he said, his voice rising as he opened the map for the other cadets, isn't the one you were issued. This has markings that weren't part of the drill. Unauthorized help. Cheating. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even seen that map before. Cadets started whispering, some exchanging glances that stung worse than the accusation itself. She really cheated? I heard one of them mutter. I stood frozen, the weight of all those eyes pressing down on me. He was rewriting the truth in front of everyone, and I had no way to fight back. Not here, not now. I clenched my jaw. That's not mine, I said flatly, forcing my voice to stay calm. Brackett smirked. Of course, that's what you'd say. He tucked the map under his arm and barked for the drill to continue, leaving me standing there with humiliation burning in my chest. The whispers followed me for the rest of the exercise. Later, when the others had dispersed, one of the aides came to fetch me. Sergeant Brackett wants you in his office. My legs felt heavier than they should as I walked across the compound. The office was dim, the blinds drawn, and Brackett sat behind the desk like he'd been waiting for this moment. Close the door, he said. I did. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. You wanted to play games, Venora? You think this is about proving you're smarter than me? His voice dropped to a low growl. I make the rules here. You don't get to win. I didn't reply. You keep pushing, he continued, and you'll leave here with nothing. Again. That word, again, hit deeper than I wanted to admit. He knew exactly which wounds to open. I walked out of his office without a word, but inside, I was reeling. Back in the barracks, I sat on my bunk, staring up at the ceiling. The sounds of conversation around me felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. My mind kept replaying his words, his smirk. I thought I'd stopped being that powerless girl, I whispered to myself. But he knows exactly how to pull me back there. For the first time since I arrived, the tears came. Not loud, not messy, just silent streams of anger and despair. That's when Elena appeared. She didn't say much at first, just sat beside me, her presence steady. Finally, she broke the silence. You're not alone, she said softly. Don't let him erase you. I turned my head toward her, surprised. She pulled something from her pocket, a small recorder, and pressed it into my hand. If he's lying, make him prove it. Record everything. I stared at the little device. It felt like holding a weapon I didn't know I needed. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, forcing my breathing to even out. He wants me to lose control, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I won't give him that satisfaction. Elena gave a small nod, like she understood, and left me to my thoughts. That night, I tucked the recorder into my gear. Brackett thought he'd cornered me, broken me, but I wasn't done. If Brackett wanted war, I'd give him one. But this time, I'd make sure everyone saw the truth. Tets. And the perfect chance came sooner than I expected, at the most high-stakes drill of the program. Brackett gathered us on the main training field at sunrise, his voice booming as he announced the joint drill. This isn't just for you cadets, he said. We've got senior officers watching today. Show them who deserves to be here. His eyes swept across the formation and landed on me. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He wanted an audience for whatever came next. I adjusted my stance, feeling the recorder tucked securely in my gear. He wanted me to crumble in front of them. Fine. He'd get a show, just not the one he expected. The field was alive with tension. Cadets shifted nervously, the rumor of my supposed cheating still lingering in their whispers. A few gave me sidelong glances, waiting to see if today would confirm what they thought they knew. I ignored them, focusing on my breathing. Stay invisible, until you need to be undeniable. Ghost Viper training had burned that into me, and I clung to it now like armor. Brackett assigned teams, putting me in charge of one, an obvious setup. "Barnes, let's see if you can lead without bending the rules," he said, making sure everyone heard. Laughter rippled through the group. I didn't react. I simply nodded and walked to my squad. "Listen up," I told them. "We're not playing Brackett's game today. We're finishing this drill clean and fast. Stick to my directions, no questions." My voice was steady, and for a brief moment I saw hesitation in their eyes, not about me, but about him. The drill started, and it didn't take long to realize what he'd done. The course had been altered, checkpoints shifted, instructions conflicting with the maps we'd been given. It was a setup meant to make me fail in front of the officers watching from the sidelines. "Ma'am, this doesn't match the objective list," one cadet muttered, panic creeping into his tone. "Of course it doesn't," I said quietly. "It's intentional." I crouched to study the terrain and reoriented our path. "Follow my lead. Trust me." We moved like a shadow through the field, recalculating with every step. I could feel Brackett watching, waiting for me to trip up, but the more he tried to sabotage us, the more determined I became. My mind ran through Ghost Viper drills. Adapt faster than they can sabotage. We finished the course, not flawlessly, but far from the disaster he'd planned. When Brackett called us in for review, his face was tight with irritation. "Barnes," he barked, "what part of following orders do you not understand? You ignored direct instructions. You compromised your team." I stepped forward, heart pounding but voice calm. "With respect, Sergeant, I adapted when the instructions didn't match the course. My team completed the drill without casualties or failures. That's leadership." Gasps and murmurs spread across the group. Brackett's eyes flashed. He needed to regain control, and he thought humiliation would do it. "Enough," he snapped. "You've been insubordinate since day one. Maybe it's time everyone knows exactly who you are." He turned toward the officers, gesturing like he was about to launch into his performance. That's when I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out the small recorder Elena had given me. "Before you continue," I said evenly, "I think everyone should hear this." I pressed play. Brackett's own voice filled the field, cold and unmistakable. "You wanted to play games? I make the rules here. You'll leave here with nothing, again." The silence that followed was deafening. Cadets froze. Officers shifted uncomfortably. I didn't look at Brackett, but I could feel his panic, his carefully built facade crumbling in front of everyone. I clicked the recorder off and slipped it back into my pocket. "You wanted proof," I said, meeting his gaze for the first time. "So did I." Then I turned and walked away. No one laughed. No one said a word. For the first time, Brackett wasn't looking at me like his victim. He was looking at me like his reckoning. But a cornered man doesn't retreat, he lunges. And Brackett wasn't finished yet. By dawn the next day, whispers spread like wildfire through the barracks. I could hear them as I walked past clusters of cadets. "Brackett's meeting with the brass. She might get kicked out anyway." They didn't even try to lower their voices. That was the point. He wanted me to know he was still pulling strings. I spent the morning sitting at the edge of my bunk, elbows on my knees, staring at the recorder on my nightstand. It wasn't enough. The recording had exposed him, but it hadn't finished him. He had rank. He had relationships. And men like Brackett knew how to use both to turn truth into smoke. By mid-afternoon, the call came, a closed-door review. They wanted me in the command hall at 1600 hours. Walking there felt like crossing enemy territory. Every step echoed louder than it should have. When I pushed open the heavy doors, Brackett was already inside, standing rigid at attention, his jaw locked. Senior officers sat behind a long table, their expressions unreadable. "Barnes," one of them said, gesturing to the chair opposite Brackett. "Sit." I obeyed, resting my hands flat on the table. Brackett spoke first, his voice dripping with faux restraint. With all due respect, sir, Cadet Barnes has been undermining authority since day one. She doctored that recording to frame me. She's manipulative, unfit for this program, and a danger to unit cohesion. I let him talk. I let him spin his web, painting me as some scheming misfit who had waltzed in to destroy everything he built. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. When the room finally went quiet, I reached into my folder. May I respond? The senior officer nodded. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside are letters from General Adrian Reed, my former commanding officer, and the Ghost Viper program's successor. They verify my training and the authenticity of my mark. One of the officers opened the envelope, scanning the documents. His eyebrows arched slightly. Brackett's face reddened. Ghost Viper doesn't exist anymore, he shouted suddenly, his composure shattering. She's lying. She's using some old badge of honor that no one can verify. The door opened before he could finish. Actually, a deep voice cut through the room. It very much exists. All eyes turned to the man in the doorway, General Adrian Reed. My chest tightened at the sight of him. My mentor, the man who'd told me once that surviving wasn't enough, that I had to own every room I walked into. Reed strode inside, his presence commanding silence. She carries the mark because she earned it, he said, his gaze locked on Brackett. You carry your rank because you abuse it. Brackett sputtered. Sir, enough. Reed didn't raise his voice, but the room felt like it vibrated. Relieve Sergeant Brackett of his command, effective immediately. 2 MPs stepped in, flanking Brackett. He looked at me one last time, eyes burning with rage, but said nothing as they led him out. I stayed seated, my face blank. There was no satisfaction in gloating. Only a quiet, steady release of a weight I'd been carrying for too long. Cadet Barnes, one of the senior officers said, your place in this program is secure. In fact, we'd like to offer you an instructor position. Your knowledge could benefit the next generation of soldiers. I shook my head. I came here to train, not to be worshipped. Let me finish what I started. Reed gave a small nod of approval. Spoken like a ghost viper. When I walked out of that hall, the sky felt different, lighter, like the air finally belonged to me again. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving the battlefield. I was owning it. But when the dust settles, the victories that matter most aren't the ones the world can see. They're the ones we fight inside ourselves. A week passed before I finally allowed myself to breathe. Fort Bragg had gone back to its usual rhythm, cadets shuffling between drills, the constant buzz of orders barked across the yard, boots pounding the dirt. But for me, everything felt still. The storm that Brackett brought into my life had passed, leaving behind a strange, bittersweet quiet. That evening, I walked across the training field just as the sun dipped low, throwing streaks of orange and pink across the horizon. It was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I stopped at the exact spot where it had all begun, the yard where Brackett had grabbed my collar, ripped my shirt, and made sure the whole world laughed at me. I closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me, but this time, it didn't burn. It felt distant, like watching someone else's life. My hand reached behind me, resting against the fabric of my shirt where my tattoo lay hidden. That mark had been my armor for so long. When I first got it, I thought it was a shield, proof that I'd earned a place among the ghost vipers. But now, I understood it was more than that. It wasn't just a mark of belonging. It was a reminder of survival, of carrying my own weight, even when the world wanted me crushed beneath it. Later that night, I sat at the small desk in my quarters, a single lamp lighting the room. I took out a piece of paper and began writing. General Reed, I started. Thank you for standing up for me when the truth was on the line. But I need you to know, you didn't save me. You reminded me I was never powerless. My hand paused on the page. That distinction mattered. It wasn't about being rescued. It was about remembering my strength when someone tried to bury it. When I was done, I folded the letter neatly, placing it in an envelope for the morning post. Then I reached into my drawer and pulled out something I hadn't touched in months, my mother's old dog tag. It was scratched, worn from years of her wearing it through hard times of her own. I'd carried it since she passed, but never truly let myself confront why. I set it on my nightstand and whispered, "I'm done hiding, Mom." The next day in the mess hall, the shift in the air was palpable. Cadets who used to avoid me now gave quiet nods of acknowledgement. One even murmured a soft "thank you" as they passed. It was strange how respect could settle like that, silent, heavy, but present. Even Lance, who had been one of my loudest hecklers, stopped at my table. He didn't say much, just gave me a brief nod, the kind of gesture that said more than any apology could. Respect, earned through silence, lasts longer than applause, earned through noise. That afternoon, one of the senior officers called me into his office. "Barnes," he said, "we'd like to put you on the leadership track. With your experience and what you've shown here, it's the logical next step." I thought about it for a long moment before shaking my head. Not yet. I came here to train, to finish what I started. Titles mean nothing if you haven't walked the whole road. He seemed surprised, but nodded. Fair enough, but when you're ready, the door's open. That evening, as I sat on my bunk with the windows open to the fading light, I let myself feel everything, the humiliation, the anger, the quiet victories. Brackett thought humiliation would break me, but humiliation is only lethal if you accept it as truth. And I never had. I didn't need the laughter to stop. I just needed my voice to keep going. I glanced at the tattoo beneath my shirt, the dog tag glinting faintly on my nightstand. Some scars you wear under your skin, others you wear like a tattoo, permanent proof you survived.